So while I know this is the time of the year other people are doing roundups of all of their purchases for the year, I'm gonna be doing the opposite. Let's do a roundup of what I have let go of this year and what I have learned in the process. Now, for the longest time, I've been a huge proponent of refusing to let go of my designer handbags. I think it's because I take so much pride in being someone who is really conscientious about how they spend their money. And just the thought of letting go of a bag means maybe having to admit that I may have made a bad financial decision. And initially, I hated admitting that type of defeat to myself. Plus, I'm also terrible about anthropomorphizing my possessions, which also makes it hard to let certain things go. But this year, something else clicked for the very first time. That maybe it's not a matter of making a bad decision, but just acknowledging the reality that my lifestyle and taste has changed over the years. Like what may have worked for me in my 20s may not be working for me now, and what works for me now may not work for me when I'm in my 40s. And where I am right now presently in terms of my age, my work, my location, it's so radically different compared to even just a few years ago. And who knows what aspects of my lifestyle will continue to change into the future. And so I've come to the realization that sometimes it may be better to let go than it is to try to make something work for you like it once had in the past. Like, can you imagine if you still dressed like you did when you were in high school? So why wouldn't it make sense that my taste in bags have changed over the years as well? Now, granted, it's not like I've never let go of bags in the past, but if I had always just gifted them to friends and family. I've gifted bags from Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Coach, etc., and I've always been happy to do so. But this year, for the first time ever in my life, I have decided to consign a couple of bags and SLGs, so that's 8 in total. So in this video, I wanted to commemorate the bags I have sold and just chat you through why I sold them, who I sold them to, and along the way, I'll share 3 lessons I've learned from this experience. And just to be completely blunt, I lost a lot of money selling these bags because when it comes down to it, aside from just a handful of bags from a handful of fashion houses, buying designer handbags is a losing game, as in 99% of designer bags are sunk costs. They're not investments. And for the most part, I'm okay with the financial loss because I never saw these bags or treated them as investments in the first place. Plus, my gosh, I've had some of these for over a decade, so they've been well loved and well worn over the years. Now, there are several, however, on the list that I've only had for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years, and I can't say so much that the cost per wear was worth it on those. But let's just jump right into it. So the first lesson I learned is that it's okay to grow out of certain bag styles. For me, that would be clutches. In my 20s, I loved me a good clutch, especially if they had like a little wristlet strap. Those were my go-to and honestly, my favorite bag style. I think a clutch makes for such a chic, carefree look, and it just gives off the impression that you are unburdened and low maintenance. But clutches are just like, they're just no longer a thing that works for me. So looking back, I don't know how I did it. Maybe I'm just more burdened and high maintenance now in my 30s, but how I managed to go shopping, run errands with only one hand available is beyond me. I mean, a clutch is even more limiting than like a top handle bag in my opinion, because even like the Birkin 25, you can at least slip it up to your wrist if you're in a pinch, but you're pretty committed to holding a clutch. I mean, I guess, yeah, you can kind of like slip it under your arm, but that's still extremely limiting. So this year I bit the bullet and I let go of 4 clutches. That's half of what I sold, if that's any indication of how much I used to love a good clutch. So the first was my men's Bottega Intrecciato pouch, and I sold that to Fashion File. What's sad is that it was in near pristine giftable condition because while I've had that for maybe 2 years, I was already at the end of my clutch era, and the reason why I bought it was because younger me would have been thrilled with it. I lost a good 50 to 60% on that sale for a clutch I maybe only used a handful of times. The next 3 clutches were all consigned to the Real. The newest one in my collection was a Versace large clutch, and again, I've had that for under 2 years. So if you've been around before, you'll know that I have an identical one in the smaller size, which is this one right here. And so I finally decided I didn't need both. I don't know why I bought 2 to begin with, and so I let the larger one go. Now, surprisingly, that one sold pretty fast on the Real, and I didn't lose a lot on it, maybe just $100 off what I originally paid, which is insane for Versace. The other two clutches were both vintage and from Louis Vuitton. Both were extremely well loved, aka at most in fair or good condition. The first was the Epi Leather Pochette Accessoire. Now, even though this was a clutch, I did put a little chain on it so it can go over the shoulder as a mini shoulder bag. So that's one example of how I've updated my clutches to make them work better for me nowadays. But at the end of the day though, I have other mini shoulder bags that I'm more likely to reach for, so I was okay letting that one go. Also, I have an entire video on how and why I've converted most of my clutches to crossbody bags. If you're interested, I'll link it down below. Again, that's just another indication of me recognizing that clutches just aren't a preference for me anymore. And I didn't get rid of all of my clutches. I kept 3. I kept my YSL Uptown pouch, this one right here. I kept, again, the small Versace, and I also kept a Prada pouch. So I think that's more than plenty to hang on to just in case I decide to have a retro clutch moment. The next thing I learned is to detach sentimental feelings from my material possessions. That is, just because I physically decide to let something go doesn't mean the memory or the sentiment has to go with it. So the last clutch I sold is a perfect example of this, and that would be my first ever designer purchase, my Louis Vuitton multicolor Kate clutch. This was something I said I would never sell because of sentimental reasons. It was my first ever designer purchase out of undergrad. I bought it with the money I earned from my first big girl job. So it definitely was a special, memorable purchase for me. I used this clutch as a wallet religiously every day for over a decade. I mean, that thing was so loved. The monogram was faded, the hardware was rubbed off, the canvas had gotten floppy, and I retired it when I moved to Europe a few years ago and switched to a smaller wallet, and since then, I have not touched that clutch once. And the central part of me wonders if I should have just kept it. It's small, it doesn't take up a whole lot of room, it's not worth anything anymore because of its condition. I even thought of getting it fixed up, like repainted and what have you, but to be fair, I don't ever see me using it again in the future, and so it's not like I'm going to forget it. I'll always remember the feeling of buying my first designer purchase, whether I still have it in my collection or not. Now, by the time this video goes live, I'm hoping all of these would have sold. Now, even if I didn't make a dime off of these, it doesn't matter. They've served me so well over the years. My next sentimental bag that I let go of was a Vivienne Westwood laptop bag from the Derby Tartan collection. Now, this was a gift from my parents when I was still in undergrad, I think a sophomore maybe, and that was also back when Vivienne Westwood was all the rage. So legit, that bag was at least 15 to 16 years old. I used that bag every day for the rest of my undergrad, and I've kept it this entire time, and every now and then I'll still work it into my work bag rotation, especially in the fall semester because of the color. But to be honest, I have more work bags than I can get through in a given academic year. And so sometimes it'll be a full year before that bag gets worked back into just like a 4-week rotation. And I remember when I finally made the decision to let that bag go, my husband did ask if I would regret it, knowing that it was a gift from my parents. And thinking back, that was the first and only designer bag they had ever gifted me. My husband distinctly asked that when something happens to either of them, we know it's just a matter of time, would I regret no longer having it? And at first, yeah, I can see why I'd regret it, but how sad would it be if my memory of my parents was condensed to the size of a bag? So again, no, I will never forget the appreciation and love and respect I have for my parents. I'll never forget the day picking it out at the store, and I'll never forget that this was a big purchase for them to make for me. But at the same time, I have years and years of memories that will live on with or without having the bag physically in my collection. Again, I'm not expecting that bag to fetch anything, but at the same time, that bag has been lovingly used for many, many years. The next sentimental bag I let go of is a more recent addition, but it again goes to show why I'm all for disassociating major life events with buying things. I have an entire video where I talk about this in more detail and why I think tying memories and important milestones to physical possessions can sometimes lessen the significance of something. But the bag I'm referring to in this case is the Versace Virtus North-South shopping tote. Now, my husband bought this for me as a surprise for my birthday, I think 2 years ago, and as much as I appreciate the gesture, I mean, he was really into Versace back then. It's a bag I liked, but I didn't love, you know? Like this bag has since been discontinued, but if you are familiar with like YSL's vertical shopping totes, they are near identical. Again, it's a perfectly fine starter designer bag. I love the top handles, the shoulder strap. It had a magnetic closure. It's super lightweight, easy to care and clean for, but again, like I liked it a lot. I just didn't love it. And so I sold this on to Fashion File, and again, lost about 60% on a bag that was in excellent, near pristine condition. Does this mean I didn't appreciate the gesture? No, the gesture is what mattered, not the item itself. But that being said, we have definitely moved away from expensive gift giving for holidays, birthdays, and anniversaries since instead we take that money and invest it into ourselves, whether through vacations or literally our investments in our retirement accounts. The final lesson I learned was not to settle. Now, this has been a major theme to my channel. I mean, part of why I started this channel was just to share my learning journey as a consumer and as someone who is price conscious. I used to be really bad about settling or finding dupes at a lesser price or just discount shopping in general. And we all know by now that there are just some itches that cannot be scratched by dupes, even if you think you are getting a better deal. Because at the end of the day, you're not getting a better deal if you still find yourself with the itch. So the first bag I sold, again, this was to Fashion File, was my Mulberry backpack. It's a story as old as time. I wanted the original Bayswater bag in the exact leather and color, but the backpack version was on sale for Black Friday, and so I saved myself a couple $100 and opted for the backpack version instead. But I still really would have preferred the original Bayswater. Take a step back further. Why did I want the original Bayswater to begin with? It's because I've always wanted the Birkin 35, but I never thought I could ever own one. Well, I have one now, so never say never. Plus, while I have been rotating that as a work bag, it really doesn't fit my laptop. Like I'd have to slip it in sideways without its case. And so yeah, sure, I can finagle it to work, but really at the end of the day, I should have just gotten what I really wanted, which was the Birkin. I mean, even if I bought the original Bayswater, I would have still eventually wanted to work my way up to the Birkin. Again, lost quite a bit of money on that one, but you live and learn. The last bag, even if it's one of the least expensive on the list, it still hurts my heart to say it out loud, is my Longchamp Le Pliage in the queer lambskin leather in the terracotta color. I made an entire video about making myself re-fall in love with this bag because out of all the bags in my collection, that was by far my least used. Again, this was a Black Friday / Cyber Weekend buy, and while I really wanted something in this lambskin finish, I convinced myself to buy one of the sale colors instead of just paying retail price for a color that I know we wouldn't be having this conversation. Like if I just went for like the black or tan. But to be fair, I have used this bag several times since the summer, and I did take it out for one last spin before making the decision to consign it to the RealReal because at the end of the day, sure, I saved a few bucks at the time, but I'm paying the price for it now. What's even worse, Longchamp doesn't carry their queer line anymore, so it's not like I can just go out and replace it with a color I would have preferred. So those are the 8 bags and SLGs I've sold this year and why I sold them and some of the valuable lessons I've learned along the way. I know it sounds like I'm a hoarder, but I'm really not. I am pretty quick to let things go except for handbags, which are by far what I spend like most of my disposable income on. So in many ways, I'm quite a minimalist in other aspects of my life. Like I probably have less than 20 pairs of shoes in total. I have at max 5 pairs of jeans. I work out at least 5 times a week and I still only have like 5 pairs of gym leggings. Like for the most part, I am not a maximalist. I just really like handbags. And it's not like I was hurting for money or space, but there is something therapeutic about seeing like spaces on my shelf empty up. And it's satisfying knowing that, hey, at least I made some money back. At the same time though, I don't foresee me selling anything else in the near future. And I don't think this is the start of a like one in, one out journey. I know that's quite common within the luxury handbag community. What's interesting though is that this experience has also made me reconsider, do I really need to follow through with my plan to add one more bag this year? Because you would think that Now that I've made back a little bit of money selling these bags and I've freed up some shelf space, I should be even more tempted to follow through with my original plan, right? But instead, it's just made me want to appreciate what I have even more. So here we are at the end of the year, and I'm okay just letting that money roll over to 2024 until I'm in the mood again to buy my next bag. Which for me is such a weird thing to say. I never thought I would not be in a mood to buy a new handbag. Let me know down in the comments if you've sold any bags lately and why. I'd love to hear about your bag selling and buying journey and process and what you've learned from it. So thank you so much for watching. And if you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing or checking out some of my other videos linked down below. Hope to see you next time.